Sophia Media. Welcome to my first year as a father, where we talk about life, fatherhood, and that pivotal first year of becoming a dad. Hi, I'm Sophia.
And I'm AC. Our guest today is Thomas Greene. Tom is a novelist and an essayist. He was also a college president and the founder of Vermont College of Fine Arts. He's also now a restaurateur. He owns Hugo's Bar and Grill in Montpelier, Vermont, which is both a restaurant and a jazz club.
Tom first became a father in 2006 with the birth of his daughter Sarah. Sarah is now 20 years old. Tom became a father again 3 years later to his daughter Jane. Jane died after 6 months in the NICU. Tom joined us to discuss fatherhood and how he wrestled with his grief while raising his eldest daughter.
Tom Greene, hi, thank you, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Tom. Great to see you.
Good to see you again, Sophia. Good to be here.
Can you tell us briefly about your parents and growing up in a family of 7 children, as I understand it?
Yeah, there were 9 of us in total. Yeah, my parents met in college. They both came out of poverty and the Depression. They were first generation college students. They met at a teacher's college in Massachusetts. They got married. They had 5 kids in 5 years, which is kind of amazing. My poor mother, she said when everybody was when one was sick, they all were sick, and she would just sleep on the couch. And then there was a 5-year break, and I was born. And I think I was a mistake, or to put it more kindly, probably an accident. And so they felt bad for me and gave me a friend. And that was my brother Dan, who was born a year after me. So there's a total of 7 of us. And we were a very tight, nuclear family that had, dinner around the table every single night. My mother cooked, my dad asked the questions, or more of the questions. We had deep discussions about civil rights and social justice and other things. And we traveled, and it was we were sort of poor and we didn't know it. My dad was a history professor then, and with 7 kids, but we lived in a big old rambling house in Worcester, Mass. And, I was lucky. I'm lucky to be a writer because I actually had a happy childhood.
So did you always imagine growing up, especially in such a large family, having children, or did it feel kind of inevitable? How did that take shape in your imagination?
I think I probably figured I would have children someday, but I was not somebody who had a burning urgency to have children. I was not somebody who was like, this is my life plan. I want this many kids, or I want that. It's more, I got married a little later. Well, not anymore compared to standards now, but I was in my 30s. And my wife really wanted to have children, and I was like, yeah, okay. But it wasn't there were people I knew who were like had a plan. I didn't have a plan. Mm-hmm. I always felt like having children long-term was something I wanted to do, but there was no urgency. My urgencies were driven more by other things I was trying to do at the time.
And you didn't have any, given you that you have, you come from such a big family, there wasn't any pressure from your parents either, right? For you to get married, settle down, and have kids.
No, the married part they were more into. They thought that would provide, I think, stability in my life. But yeah, no, there wasn't a pressure of children because my older brothers and sisters were all having kids.
Oh, I see.
My parents had 14 grandchildren, so ultimately, so there was a bunch of them running around already. So there was plenty to play with.
Right.
But when you and your wife decided to have children, was there a conversation beforehand? Was it just spontaneity?
No, there was deliberateness to it, that she was driving, but yeah, the 2 times that we had children, both of them were planned.
And what did that conversation look like?
Boy, I don't remember. She really wanted a lot of kids, actually, honestly. There might be some pushback from me on like a lot of kids, but I don't remember the specifics of it. It was more organic. It's the type of thing you decide before you get married, right? That's a conversation you have, I think, before you get married. If one person's like, I never want to have children, the other person's like, I really need to have children, then, you're probably not a match, because those are big existential life choices you have to make. And so I think we had settled that conversation before, and it was clear that I was willing to have children, 2 or 3 in that range. And so we had kind of a concrete conversation about what that might look like.
And was she working at the time?
She was. So we actually did like a little bit of reversal. So she was, when I first met her, she was bartending at the restaurant where I later opened Hugo's.
Oh, wow. My
restaurant now. Yeah, there's a lot of history in that building. It's strange.
Yeah.
So she was bartending and I met her there, but then I met her in a different context. But when we got married, she was working as an editor, a book editor. And I had left my job and was writing full time. And so she was going to the office. I was not. And then we did a switch after Sarah was born where I went back to direct a graduate program at a college and she was then not working at home full time, which she was, until Sarah was probably 10, 11.
Do you remember what the pregnancy was like for you? What was going through your head at the time?
Yeah, it was terrifying. I mean, I was like, yeah.
Even before birth?
Well, I was afraid of the birth process, like that. I don't like medical stuff. And that was freaking me out probably on a level, I made a mistake. I made a calculated error in not doing like the class thing that everybody did because I just don't like following rules. We got like a private lesson from somebody and I think the class might have helped, so we didn't do any of that stuff. I just like had the teacher, I hired him separately to come like give us like a 2-hour one-on-one. I'm like, okay, now we know what's going on. But, for her, the pregnancy was great because she was totally happy being pregnant. She loved being pregnant. For me, I remember I was playing basketball like 5 days a week. I got in really good shape. I was like playing full court basketball all week because I'd played basketball as a kid. I played in college, but I hadn't played. And somehow it was like that connected me back to my childhood. Like it was like I was like in denial, but I was also preparing, I think, for what was to come. So I was very nervous about the birth process, more so than the parenting piece of it, which is, kind of probably the inverse of what you should think about.
Right. But, given the, like it is not even a smooth pregnancy winds up always being 100% easy.
Right.
And I'm kind of wondering, like, once you got into the hospital and given that level of trepidation that you had, how did that work out? Was it, you're like, whoa, this is actually easier than I expected, or?
Oh, no, it's far worse.
Okay. Tell me about why.
So first to tell you that when my wife called to tell me that her water broke, I had just arrived at a book club. A group of women were doing a book club. They were reading one of my novels. They had given me a glass of wine. We didn't think it was happening that night. I was like sitting there drinking a glass of wine and my wife called and on my phone, I'm like, oh, your water broke? And I was like, okay, well, I'm doing this thing. And all these women are like, no, you have to go now. Like, you have to go. Like, we're kicking you out. Someone's putting my coat on and I'm like, oh, this is really happening. Okay. And then like I picked up Tia at home and, the hospital we were going to, Dartmouth Hitchcock, was like 45 minutes away. So, I was just like hauling down the highway.
Ooh, it's a long ride.
It's a long ride, yeah. And we got there and, at first it was fine, but she's a petite woman. She has a lot of pain and people have a particular plan around birth. She had a plan she wanted to do, which was not have drugs or other things. But then that went out the window, as soon as she was in like a lot of pain. And, it was like when the guy came in with the epidural, it's like God came in the room, But I remember just being completely flipped out. And then at one point, like suddenly everybody was in the room, doctors, everything else. And it had been a long time. I mean, we've been at this now for a while and Sarah wasn't progressing and her heart rate was slowing. So they wanted to do a C-section, which my wife did not want at all. So she was telling me to fight for her. She's like, fight for me, fight for me. And I was like, I said to the doctors, I was like, is this something that has to be done? And the guy's like, there is no choice here. And I said, well, how long is it going to take? And he was like, 20 minutes. I was like, 20 minutes? We've been at this for like 12 hours. I was like, So she had a C-section and Sarah was born and came out redheaded and healthy and beautiful and perfect.
Well, all's well that ends well, I guess. But yeah, I think some people would be shocked at how quickly a C-section actually goes in the right hands, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's fast. And I mean, they didn't To be honest, they were worried about me because I was a little wobbly, like they didn't want me in there. The guy's like, we're going to keep you over here and you're not looking at anything and you're not touching anything. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to. So I was up top near my wife's head while it was happening. I had no view down below, which is fine with me.
Yeah.
Same.
I just wanted to see the baby. And same. Yeah. I'm not one of those getting in there people, I don't understand those guys, but.
So what was it like the first moment you laid eyes on Sarah?
It was kind of, it's funny. I haven't really thought about this till you asked me. This is going to be a hard conversation today. I can already tell. For me emotionally, I think I'm going to be a wreck. I was just, she was perfect. She had red hair, which surprised me. Her hair is now blonde. I was blonde as a baby and had some ginger in my beard and stuff in my middle-aged years. But she was redheaded and blue-eyed, and she was very healthy looking and very perfect. I don't know what to tell you. It was kind of a sense of overwhelming, but I also was aware of the whole external audience that was out there in the world who was waiting for news of this. So that was a big part of my job, was to leave and go out in the parking lot at 6 a.m. and call first my wife's mom and then my parents and then brothers and sisters and other people and let everybody know that we had a new queen in the world.
Did you get to hold her for a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, she was, she was nursing pretty much right away. And then, I was holding her, and then there were visitors and they would take her away sometimes to just give us a break and let Tia sleep. Mm-hmm. But then they just kick you out. Like, it feels like you should be there for a couple months, like, where's the whole team? They just throw you in a car and send you home, and they're like, figure it out.
And you're like, we're not ready for this.
I wasn't ready for it. My wife was fine. I wasn't ready for it.
Can I take a step back real quick? Were you close with your own dad?
Very. Yeah, I'm still close with him.
Did y'all have conversations about, what to expect?
No. Given
that he'd been through this 7 times? No.
Well, we did, but he didn't. He wasn't there. You got to remember, it was the 60s. He had a bunch of kids at home. He would literally drop my mother off at the front door of the hospital.
Wow.
And then go home and wait and the doctor would call and say, you have a football player, you got a cheerleader, which is like, so genderized and weird to think about now, but that was,
wow.
That was like, late 50s, early 60s when my older brothers and sisters were born. That was kind of the way it went down. And so he wasn't there for the birth of any of his children, just when they came home. He was a very hands-on father in a lot of ways, but it was a different time, different kind of roles, different division of responsibilities. Men often were not in. That's a more recent phenomenon.
And so I feel like in the early 2000s, there must have been a lot of surprises that hit you. What was that like? What surprised you most?
Well, Sarah was born in 2006. I think when you're going through things that are different or new or challenging, we have coping mechanisms that tend to block out the situation that we're actually in. So it's only later with the span of time and memory and history that you can actually, like I can right now, feel the weight of responsibility I probably felt. But at the moment, I was kind of just going through the day-to-day motions of this thing of having a baby at home. And I had an incredibly capable partner who was very good at this. So, we had kind of a bit of a division of labor on some level. I cooked. I've always done the cooking. So I would cook, I would shop, I would do those things. I would take time with the baby and hold the baby. But I obviously couldn't nurse or feed the baby, And so, there's a kind of division of labor that happens and you sort of figure it out as you go. But I also went quickly back to work for the first time, like 3 weeks after she was born. And I had been working at home for years, but I got this opportunity, as I said, to run this graduate program. I thought it was going to be 3 or 4 months. And so I took advantage of it.
Yeah. So that was just an opportunity that just came along at that time. It wasn't like, oh, now you're a father. You felt like you had to look for some other job other than just being a writer at home.
No, it was a phone call I got, and we talked about it, and she saw it as a good opportunity too, because there was also the potential possibility it could lead into something where she wouldn't have to go back to work because, she was our healthcare and she was a steady salary, and I was riding the wave of being a writer where, I get a book advance and I live on it for, 8 months, and then I got to get another book advance and, or get a deal, a European deal that pays a little money or some royalties come in. And, it's a funky way to make a living.
Yeah.
So having her steady income as a book editor helped, but this created the possibility that maybe she wouldn't have to go back to that. And she didn't because, that 3-month gig I had ended up turning into becoming a college president, which is a whole other thing.
Wow. I think you had just mentioned something about looking back. There were times where you were, I forget the exact words you said, like you were in hiding or something to that effect.
Denial, probably. Yeah.
Denial.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now that you look back to that phase of your life, what were the ways that you were in denial about, having this new baby in your life? I
think I was trying to just kind of keep on what I was doing before, as much as I could. I still wanted to be out with my friends. I wanted to do things. I wanted to do all of that stuff. And there was some things that were limiting that way, because you did have to, she's home with the baby all day and I'm out all day. And then I'm coming home and, that's like, here, your turn, for a while. And,
right.
And that was a change, And so I think trying to kind of find that balance where I could be supportive and helpful, but also I was starting what was an incredibly ambitious project, and I was writing a novel.
Wow.
I was starting a college when my daughter was 2-3 months old, and which I thought was going to be, more hubris. Thought it was going to be kind of a quick thing. It was like 2 years. It was like 2 years of 12-hour days. And so there was I don't know that my experience was typical of and not there's a typical father experience, because there are all kinds of fathers.
Right.
But I leaned, I think, into I got to make some money. I'll make some money for us. Mm-hmm. I will provide. I will get the food. I will make sure we get the right house. We had a house that was in the country that we liked, but my wife felt very lonely and didn't have the presence of like other moms and other things. So I orchestrated a move into town and bought an old Victorian where there was a neighborhood full of people with children, things like that. So there were things I did deliberately that were globally useful to being a dad, but the hands-on stuff wasn't quite my bread and butter until a little bit later.
What was the moment that was there a moment that changed your perspective on that?
Necessity did. It was when my second daughter, Jane, when Tia was pregnant with Jane, and she went into the hospital for a routine ultrasound and her water had already broke and she was at like 20 weeks.
Oh.
And so they said, and this was Dartmouth Hitchcock, which was an hour away. And they said, you're not leaving the hospital.
Right.
And so that meant I was going home to Sarah alone, and Tia was in the hospital and Sarah's 3, and try to explain to a 3-year-old that her mom is 40 miles away and she's not going to see her much because infection and other things, we could sneak her in, but she was not going to be seeing her much for a couple months probably.
Wow. Then
suddenly it's just me. And this is not what she signed up for, Sarah. She's like, where's my mom? What's he doing here?
And at that age, she's old enough to understand that her mom is going to have a baby.
Yes, she did. I mean, she's the one who actually woke me up in the morning with the pregnancy strip in her hand. Sarah did.
No way.
Showed it to me, and I was like, oh, God. Here we go.
But what was the like, how do you have that kind of conversation with a 3-year-old? I can't imagine, because having a small child myself, it seems so difficult.
Well, here's the thing, and I've written about this, but there's a moment that was incredibly cathartic for me in that process. I'm going to try to get through it because it might get a little emotional for me on this one. But
sure.
I was trying to put Sarah to bed, and she was just throwing a crazy tantrum. She was all throwing stuff in her room. She was like bananas. She was so angry and wanted her mother back, this whole thing. And I realized that I did have like one tiny superpower, which is storytelling, Mm-hmm. And so I said to her, do you see him? Did you see him? And she's like, who? And I was like, that's Mr. George Mouse. He's right over there. She's like, no, he's not, this kind of thing. And she stopped crying for a second. And she's like, what is he doing? I was like, it's Mr. George Mouse. You didn't see him? He knows your name. And she's like, does he know your name? And I'm like, no, he doesn't know my name because he just, the thing about this is that adults, I said to her, they stop believing in magic. So animals know this. So they just call him or her, so he's like, him's right there. And that's Sarah, and she's like, he knows my name. She's like, where's he live? And I was like, he lives at One Laundry Place, where the laundry room is, and he said him doesn't know where that is, which was true. That would be me. And so I started telling her the story, and then it became a sort of ongoing quest story I would tell her at night over a period of years about, that Mr. George Mouse was really the narrator of a larger story, which involved a group of skunks that formed a band and there was one skunk who came into town. Chicken Bone Jones was his name, and he came into town, and he was a blues man, and he formed a band of skunks. And for a time, everything in the neighborhood was really peaceful because all the animals would get together and listen to the skunk band. But then people began to trap the skunks and move them because they would be skunks. And so as the skunks started to disappear, the music stopped. And the neighborhood was in disarray, which meant that Ernie the Squirrel and Mr. Raccoon had to go find the band and bring it back together. And this was this long quest story with all these different characters. I told her over a span of 3 years.
Hold on. I'm a little blown away because this is just such an improv moment. And I think that's one thing that fatherhood forces on you is like the ability to think on your feet in order to calm someone down who isn't at all rational.
Well, I will say, so this is the powerful thing about it, just to be succinct about it, is that I knew stories could do a lot of things, right? I knew stories could make people happy. They could do other things. I wrote stories for a living. I knew that stories could even start a college because that's mostly how I started college was by telling the story of the thing I was going to do while I was doing it, even though a lot of it was BS and people would say like, that's not going to happen. But the more you told it, the more it became real. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't realize was that stories could make a father become a dad.
Oh.
And that's really what happened in that moment in that room that night for me. And everything was different after that.
Oh, I love that.
That's an incredible distinction too.
Yeah, big distinction. Yeah.
So Jane is in the hospital for quite a long time, as I understand it. You're dealing with Sarah at home alone.
Well, Sarah, Tia's in the hospital. Tia would be.
Oh, Tia's in the hospital. Okay.
Tia's in the hospital because Jane hasn't been born yet. Tia had to. They didn't know how long she was going to hang on. The chances are that Jane would even be born alive were slim. But Tia was a very incredibly strong, willful person. And so she hung on bed rest a little more than a month in the hospital with her water broke without getting an infection. And then she started to get the infection in that situation is a question of when, not if. Mm. And as soon as she gets an infection, takes hold, they test her all day long, the baby has to come out. Mm-hmm. And so for Jane, that was at 28 weeks, and that's when Jane was born. I was at the college when I got the call from the hospital saying that I had to get down there if I wanted to see the birth, it was 45 minutes away. I didn't get down there in time. When I got there, Jane had already been born. Mm. And that was a stressful experience as I've ever had in my life, for sure.
Yeah, I could only imagine.
Now, Sarah, at this point, I had to enlist good friends. I'm like, you got to go to my house, take care of Sarah. Mm-hmm. At that point, it was like, you're running triage, right? I got to get down to Dartmouth. Baby's born, new baby's born, Jane's born. When I got there, Tia was in a room. The baby was not with her. There was a minister in there, which I guess had become somebody who had befriended Tia on her bed rest and had come in and talked with her, pastoral person. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, it pissed me off that he was there because I didn't understand the context. I was like, is she dead? Is that why he's here? Because I didn't know if Jane had made it or not. And they were like, no, your daughter's alive. Do you want to see her? And I was like, yeah. So they took me into a room where she was on a table. And I mean, she looked like a cricket to me. She was so tiny. Mm. She was 1 pound, 4 ounces. Ooh.
Wow.
And while I was there, the guy's like, she's doing well. And then she started to code, which means she was going to die on the table. And they resuscitated her. So we saw her later that day, and she was in a incubator kind of thing, and they wheeled Tia in to be next to her in the NICU. And, NICU was a crazy place. people spend time in the NICU. Most people spend 3 or 4 days in a NICU. That's kind of the average stay for people who have a baby. We were there for 6 months.
6 months. Oh my gosh.
6 months. And people just, and at 2 different ones. We were 5 months at Dartmouth Hitchcock and 1 month at Boston. And Jane never made it out of the hospital. I mean, she lived her entire life in the hospital. But people describe the experience of being in a NICU as akin to combat in terms of PTSD, because there's, like combat, there's a lot of moments of quiet. And then there's suddenly great trauma. Something changes quickly. And there's also the cacophony of sounds all the time. The beeping, the constant beeping, the machines, the whirring, the whole thing. So, yeah, we became hardcore NICU regulars.
I honestly, I don't know how you lived through that, 6 months. And you'd said before that you really had an aversion to medical stuff.
Oh my God, so much. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and that I just can't imagine being under that kind of stress, with all the stuff that triggers you, and also with your own child being there, and you don't know what the next moment's going to bring. And that lasting for 6 months, I just cannot even imagine.
It was an experience like no other, but I have to say that I think that this is true of not just me, but everybody, that we're far more resourceful and stronger than we think we are. And when we're faced with levels of crisis like this, we go to a place where we're able to sort of deal. How you deal depends, and it's different for everybody, but you have no choice. So you do it. You just do the work. You show up every day and do the work, and that's all you can do. And there's also the kind of things that bring you joy, and the celebrations and sort of the victories become smaller and more finite when you're in that kind of situation. Like she had a good night. Her oxygen was in the 90s. The friendships we made with the nurses and the doctors. We were there so long that the doctors at Dartmouth were on, the head doctor in the NICU, it was a small NICU, it's a very good one, is on a month at a time and then they leave. It's like they're on for a month and then they leave, another person comes on for a month and then they leave and another person comes on. So it's like 4 of them, and they rotate months. So the guy who founded the NICU was there when Jane was born. He was like in his last week of his 1 month shift, right? And so when he first saw Jane, he said to me, I got to tell you, I like her spirit. That's what he said. There was something about the way she was moving. He said, I like her spirit. And his name was Dr. Little. And then he was gone for like 3 months. And then he came back again. And the first day he came back, he walked in to like the weekly doctors and nurses meeting. And I was running the meeting.
Wait. You got to tell me how that happened.
I don't know. It just kind of happened organically. There was like a weekly meeting, and I was like, I was used to running things. And so I just and I was sitting at the head of the table and and kind of going through what the week plan was and stuff. And he walked in and he was like flabbergasted by this. He stopped the meeting and he's like, he pointed to me. He's like, you come talk to me. And when 2 of us walked down the hall, me and Dr. Little, and we went down the hall and we were halfway down there and he stopped and he's like, I have to tell you something. When I walked in there and I saw you running that meeting, I thought, what the hell is going on? He's like, and I was pissed. I was like, can I leave this place for a minute? A parent's running the meeting? And he's like, and then I thought about it, actually, just while we were walking, I thought about it. And I realized that if I was a father, I might have done the same thing. And he said, you know how I don't shake hands? Because he would never shake hands. He worked with little babies who were sick. He's like, I'm going to shake your hand.
Wow.
And he shook my hand in the hallway and I just lost it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was just thinking how it tells you how intense these places are, even for the doctors, that they could only handle 1 month at a time. And then they have to take 3 months break before they could come back. Yeah. And then for you and Tia to be there for like 6 months, or for Jane to have been there for 6 months, that's really incredible. And you were saying how, during these times, we actually learn about the strength, the depth of our own strength. So do you remember, was there anything that helped you find your own strength?
I mean, I think about NICUs with babies like Jane, and basically what happened to Jane was her lungs never fully developed, right? And so the thing that saved her were these machines that allowed her to breathe. But the very machines that allowed her to breathe were also the thing that was killing her.
Oh, really?
Because they were creating a disease called BPD, which is common for, you don't want anybody to be on a breathing machine for 6 months. The goal was to try to wean them off and get off it. But she never got to a place where she could. But these folks are working on the margins of science. They're working in areas that they don't have the answers, all the answers, and they're testing different things. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I actually spent a lot of time doing like research around like what was happening in cutting edge stuff. And if this also kind of annoyed the doctors at first. Like one doctor was like, okay,
Sure.
Dr. Google's in the room. And I'm like, no, it's not Dr. Google. I actually, I mean, I just read the University of Texas paper that came out, and he's like, what? And I looked up experts in the field. I just kind of like, I wanted to do something, and I found a doctor in Boston who ran a NICU at Children's Hospital, and I called him out of the blue, and I eventually got through to him, and he called me back, and we had this long conversation at night, and I explained to him Jane's whole situation. He's like, look, I don't want to interfere with anybody's care, but feel free to call me anytime, which is the last thing you should have said to me, because I was calling him every night. And I was like, this is what happened today, and what's your read on it? Because I'm just like maniacal about information, and like he's like asleep sometimes. I'm waking him up and he's taking my call. I mean, he was a gem of a human being, and he ultimately oversaw Jane's move to Boston for that last month. Not that it made a difference, but so I do think you do that. I had one really powerful moment where there was only one baby in the NICU who had been there longer than Jane, and that was a boy named Callum. And Callum was like I always thought Jane was bad, but Callum seemed like he was the worst of the worst babies in terms of the sickest. Like they'd been there like almost a year, and like Callum like had his own room.
Wow.
Like he could walk a little bit, like, and he was like tethered like a spaceman to like an oxygen thing, and he would walk around. And well, it turned out that Callum's dad, I knew his brother. And his brother reached out to me one time. He's like, my brother's also in the NICU at Dartmouth. You guys should get together. And so we made a plan, and he connected us and we exchanged phone numbers. And he and I got together for lunch one day while we're in the middle of this. And it was like we were the only people on the planet having this experience, which certainly isn't true, but it felt that way.
Yeah.
And we got drunk in the middle of the day. I'm not going to lie about it. The two of us, we sat there. We drank a couple bottles of wine, and we just like let go and like explained the whole experience we were having to each other. And that was like really kind of powerful and cathartic too.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
To jump back a little bit to the domestic front, did you tell Sarah about Jane being born in the NICU, and like how did that conversation go? Again, like knowing that.
I mean, she was down there all the time. I think she understood as much as she could at 3 years old. But the NICU at Dartmouth had a great policy. They were very family oriented. There's a lot of NICUs where Sarah would never have been allowed to see her sister, but she was allowed to come in and be there. I mean, Jane looked like it grew quickly into being like a normal looking baby. I mean, she got chubby.
Wow.
She had fat cheeks. She was nursing all the time. It was just that she had these machines hooked up to her. So Sarah would go down and be with her when she could. We ended up, as that 6 months went on, like, you had to take care of yourself too. So we decided on a strategy, which we were not going to basically live there. We couldn't live with Jane. Jane had great people taking care of her, and we would take turns. Tia would go down. There's some days Tia wouldn't go down. I would sometimes go down at night. Like I would go down and spend the night there after work. Tia would be there during the day and then leave at 4, drive out an hour home and be with Sarah, because we wanted Sarah's life to be normal too, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a very difficult balancing act during that 6 months.
Yeah. And what was it like between you and Tia when this was all happening? Like what were your conversations like from day to day?
You're living completely in the moment of this experience. I always made the last phone call of the night, probably around 10:30, 11 at night. I would call down to Dartmouth and talk to the nurse who was taking care of Jane and get a report, and then go tell Tia before she went to sleep, while I'd wake her up and say, this is where her numbers are at. I mean, it was all numbers driven. We were just so in the soup of it that I don't think there was really it was all practical conversations around logistics, timing, what we're doing, who's picking up Sarah from daycare, from her preschool or whatever she was doing at the time. She's going to some little kid preschool thing. And so, it was a lot to manage. And it wasn't right next door either, which was hard. I mean, it's really almost fully an hour away. So it was very challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. So survival mode.
Pretty much.
Like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the rest of your family? I mean, you mentioned earlier that you came from such a large family. How did your relationship with those people change? Whether it was siblings, parents, anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, it's we're a really tight knit group. I mean, I'm very lucky that way. I've got 6 siblings. We have a sibling text thread. We text every day.
Nice.
We all get along for the most part. We rely on each other. So I mean, having that, like my siblings were coming up and visiting Jane. They were around. They were a resource for me. So I think and they have children of their own. So I'm in addition to being a father, I'm an uncle many times over. Mm-hmm. And I've had to go through tribulations that way too. I lost a nephew who was I was his godfather, and he took his own life when he was 22, and that was just entirely brutal on my brother. And my brother relied on me. He's like, tell me what this is like losing a child. And I'm like, well, it's not really relative in the same way. I mean, Jane was 6 months, Sean was 22, and he's like, I just need to know, how long is it going to last? How long is it going to last? Like, he wanted to know how. And I said, it's going to be a while. I said, here's the thing about grief. Look, it's not a straight line. It kind of moves in different ways. But the other thing I'll tell you about grief is that the flip side of it is joy, which is very strange to think about. But that is very true. The flip side of grief is joy, because there are moments when even you're in the darkest time and the worst things are happening, or you lost somebody who's so important to you. There are moments of profound joy as you remember pieces of that life or what happened with that life around. And so you have to know that. And I said to him, and someday you're going to wake up and the sun's shining and everything feels a little different. And you're going to keep moving. And in the Irish tradition, you remember that as long as you're telling stories about somebody, they're never actually gone. So.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. And it sounds like it's such a Taoist concept too. Just, you can't have good without the bad, and light without darkness. Yeah. This whole idea of the grief always also is accompanied by joy, I think, is a really important thing to recognize. So what do you remember the most about these joyful moments when it comes to Jane?
There was such a solidarity and love for her in that hospital, and the friendships we made with the nurses, who were incredible people. I mean, if there's any justice in the world, nurses will inherit the earth someday. I mean, they are the greatest people in the world. I mean, the people, they're so selfless in terms of the work they do and how hard it is, and it wears on them. They have to deal with this stuff every day, and they get attached to people. And I think the people, particularly working with end of life care, whether it's the elderly or if it's babies that are in trouble, are doing some of the most difficult work that could be done. So I remember the joy that came from that. Again, I know a big piece of it, I think, that came out of it was my relationship with Sarah was stronger. As I suggested, that there really made me a dad, not just a father. And I think there is a distinction sometimes. And I think that, Jane made me a stronger person. May have ended my marriage because we never really fully recovered from it. And that is the statistics on parents who lose children getting divorced is like 75%.
Wow.
Extremely high. And, for us, it was a bit of a slow burn after that. But we found ourselves sort of growing apart, I think. And a big part of it was, we shared this loss, and it was hard to know what to do with it. And we were each dealing with it in our own different ways. For years, there's a ceremony at University of Vermont Chapel they do for people who've lost children. Tons of people go because there are lots of people who've had this experience, right? Not just babies, but they wanted me to give a keynote address at it for years. And I always said no. And the reason I said no was that I think there is a distinction between a miscarriage and a 6-month-old baby dying, And I think there's a distinction between a 6-month-old baby dying and a 25-year-old son dying. But I ultimately gave that talk, and I explained why, and that's how I started by saying I had said no to this 5 times. And the reason I decided to say yes to it was that I realized that there are things about these experiences that are incredibly universal to all of us. Really, the one job of being a parent is to make sure your kids outlive you on some level. And this isn't to cast any, we didn't do anything wrong. There was no failure on our part. There's no failure on the parts of people who lose children. Don't get me wrong, but that is a piece of it. You know what I mean? If you want to boil it down to its simplicity, but it is sometimes that simple. You know, you want your kids to live a much longer life than you. Not that you want to die young, but you want to live long and you want them to live longer. You know, for me, it was, I could not have done this interview and I could not have talked to you about this 10 years ago, you know, and it took I wrote a novel that was a bestseller called The Headmaster's Wife. That was about parents who lose a child, in which I took what I was feeling around grief and these ideas and put them into a novel. And that's what novels do well, is they sort of obfuscate the truth sometimes to create a greater truth. But it wasn't until really 2020 or 2022 when I wrote Notes from the Porch that it was the first time I sort of tackled the idea of actually writing about this experience with Jane. And that in that little essay, you know, called Our Girl Jane, I don't know what it is, 5-6 pages, the hardest thing I've ever written in my life. I mean, there's just simple clarity to it. There's not much of that story is straightforward, but writing it was the hardest thing I've ever done from a literary point of view.
I keep thinking back to what you said about, was it Dr. Little?
Yes.
Is his name?
Yeah.
At the NICU. He founded the hospital and he must have seen, I don't know how many babies, right, over the years, but he specifically said that Jane had a great spirit that he liked. He
did. Yeah. And she did. And she was a fighter, you know, and she had a personality. Mm-hmm. And she was brown-eyed, which was different. Sarah's blonde and blue-eyed like me, and Jane had her mother's brown eyes. And I would have loved to have seen what she would become. Yeah. I just feel like it's just so poignant for me to picture her being so little. It's like a 1 pound and 4 ounces or 6 ounces. 4 ounces, yeah. And then, but, you know, with a big spirit, and you keep saying that the time with her actually made you stronger. And it just makes a lot of sense. I feel like there's this whole visual contrast about like such a tiny, tiny being, but having a huge spirit and having a huge impact on you as her dad. It's just very powerful. I don't have any better word for it. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, not just me, but people around the world, as you know, from reading that story of mine. Right. That, you know, my wife asked people to send postcards to our house after Jane died because she had been running a blog. Yeah. And they came from every corner of the world, all the continents, you know, and every state in the United States. And not just postcards, but quilts, other things. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, and on the 1-year anniversary of her death, we got a postcard from the Antarctic Science Station.
No way.
Yeah, with all the scientists in their like crazy space winter costumes, holding up a sign that said Jane was here. That's what my wife asked people to write.
Oh, my goodness.
So, I mean, you think about the power of this little baby who lived a short period of time, and people connected with her story. Indeed, yeah. Yeah, when we came home, our whole town was, the little city I live in Jane was here.
Oh, wow.
Things everywhere. Yeah. Crazy.
Can I revisit the question of grief that you brought up earlier?
Yeah.
Which is, and grief versus joy. I had a conversation with a friend recently where she said to me, you know, the wonderful thing about grief, and this may go to a little bit of a silly place, is that while you're grieving, people who love you will let you do whatever you want within reason. Did you have a moment like that?
I don't know if I had a moment like that. I probably had a lot of moments like that. I just, I get the point. I think there's a truth to that. It's funny, like learning from other traditions, you know, I mean, the Jewish tradition of, is it, Shiva, is that right? The way people sit and they come and visit and sit.
Sure, yeah.
I think that is, growing up Irish Catholic, I mean, that's, we had different relationships with death and people. And I found that incredibly powerful around grieving. I actually found the having everybody together, because that is the joy part, right? It brings everybody together. I mean, we did a memorial service for Jane, and suddenly all my entire family was here in Vermont, and my parents and all my siblings and their wives and kids, and there was a lot of food and joy and drinking and fun and and just kind of stories and conversation. And so I think, we're designed to forget and survive, but always to remember at the same time. And that it sort of gets to that. There is a silliness to it. You're allowed to do things. You're allowed grace. You don't have to think about other things. You're allowed to just be for a minute.
Right.
Without the other responsibilities of life, because people recognize what it is you're going through.
Man, grace is such a wonderful term for that.
Yeah.
But is it that part of things that you think is why, as a writer, stories about loss or grief might resonate so deeply with people? Because we're all going to go through it at some point.
Yeah, I do think that's a big part of it. A children's writer once told me that children's writing is about, learning how to live. And adult writing is about learning how to die. And I was like, well, that's kind of morbid and grim, but it's never left my head. And I do think that there is a truth to that, grief is one of the most significant emotions we feel in life. And it's something I was so afraid of. I had never lost anybody other than my grandmother, when I was 12. And that tore me apart. But as a 12-year-old, that's the experience everybody goes through first. But I had never really lost anybody. And now I've lost several significant people in my life. And you get better at it. But you also find in it the deeper meaning of what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a religious person. I mean, I was raised Irish Catholic, but I've been an atheist my whole life. But lately, there are things that are making me believe in magic. Jane is one of them. I mean, I often think of her and I see in a great blue heron appears. That's been happening for years now. And there was a heron in the story I used to tell my daughter, Sarah, and the heron would just fly by and say, "Don't believe the turtle." That was what the heron would say in my stories, because turtles are liars. So we all know that. So, yeah, I think it's all part of the same thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, because learning to die and learning how to do that well is the same as learning how to live well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just down. I mean, speaking of fathers, it was my father's 95th birthday last Sunday. So we went down and had dinner with him. He's 95. He lost his wife and my mother about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago now, I guess. So that was hard. They were together for 70 years, and very, very hard on him. Mm-hmm. He's astonishing. I mean, his optimism and his will to live at 95, and his optimism about life and, the things that are keeping him going, really powerful. And a big part of that is having children. And he told us that. He gave a speech for the ages to us, where he basically had all his children there. And he said, here's the secret to a long life. Do things you love career-wise, marry a person you love, work out all the time, which was his thing. He's like, honestly, I work out more than any of you guys do, and I'm 95. He's like, I do. Some of you are slouching it. I think he was pointing at me. And he said, but the most important thing is to give love and be loved, and especially family. So I do think that is part of the big power of fatherhood that you can never forget, that you're always there. It never goes away. It's a job for life.
I don't want to skip too far ahead of the timeline, but in the intervening years between Jane's death and Sarah's teenagehood, going off to college, becoming a grown-up, like, how did your relationship with her change, and was there a particular effect that Jane's death had on the evolution of that relationship?
That's a great question. I think our relationship has evolved with her age. We've had different kind of roles in her life, her mother and I. I mean, her mother far more hands-on Me, more the storyteller, take her places for the weekend kind of dad. The most profound thing for me in this relationship is working with her in the restaurant, because she's been working there since she was 15 now, since I opened the place. And so
she knows how to run things better than you by now.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. 100%. I mean, the other day she was giving me a hard time about something, but yeah, she's like now like a salty industry veteran, minus the chain smoking, the full sleeve tattoos, thank God. But she's also like a college student, studying philosophy at Skidmore College. But I just love how the relationship has evolved, from, I was never the disciplinarian. I mean, her mom did that. I was always more the kind of listening ear or person who could help. And, she had all the struggles of teenagehood that girls have. Mm-hmm. It compounded particularly by COVID and the pandemic.
Right.
I mean, they were just home forever.
Right.
But to see her now, like finding her voice, like becoming the woman that she's meant to be, and having her as a peer where we can talk about anything. And I can tell her about all the stupid shit I did in my life, when I was her age, and something much stupider than things that she's done. And have a level of honesty with each other is so powerful. Mm-hmm. Like that has been transformative for me, maybe for her too, but it's definitely been transformative for me that I'm able to do that with her now.
Yeah.
That I'm able to talk with her with absolute 100% honesty about everything, whether it's relationships I'm in or involved in, or one she's in, or, we're able to have these like really frank, clear conversations that don't have any judgment attached to them anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a real shift in a parental relationship that happens. And it's a gift, I think, when it does.
I have one last question, actually, kind of on that note,
yeah.
Which is looking back at that and recognizing the growth of your daughter. Like, do you have goals or ideals about the kind of dad you want to be as she keeps growing up, as you hopefully continue to mature?
Yeah, I know. I'm still learning. I think it's with men, it's touch and go, as you know.
Yeah.
Like it's like we're basically useless till we're 40.
Don't call me out. Don't call me out.
Yeah. After that, after that, it's a bit of a crapshoot for the next 15 years, and then suddenly something cuts a kick into gear in your mid 50s. My hope is that our relationship just continues to deepen and grow, and this kind of trust and friendship. And I don't know what the contours of that are going to look like, and I don't pretend to know. I'm honestly surprised where it is now. Like the transformations happened over the last year and a half, where, as I talked about, this sort of radical honesty we have with each other. But it's the most important relationship in my life. So,
mm-hmm.
It's funny. I don't think there's so much about parenting that focuses on childhood.
Yeah.
That I think that is really burning for me now. It's like, okay, I can get guidance from a lot of other men on 0 to 19.
Yeah.
Moving into adulthood and like discovering each other as people, like developed people, seems so profound and so difficult at the same time, because you start to regard each other as such.
I think that's entirely true. And I think the thing that worries me, or I'm afraid of to some extent, is the 20s. Because I think this is a very hard time for this generation to be in their 20s.
Yeah.
I mean, it was hard for me. 20s were hard, but it was different. Like I was just out on my own. I was living in a cabin in the woods of Vermont with a girlfriend and dreaming of writing novels and working out of college, as an administrator, and just kind of figuring it out. But it takes longer now. The adulting part, the place between college and the rest of life has become suddenly like a bigger, for most kids, a bigger time frame, and one that's fraught and full of challenges. There's all those sort of tasks you have to fulfill, like what are you going to do for work, and where are you going to live, and who's your circle of friends, and is there a mate or a partner in your life? And the 20s are just awful. I mean, teenage years are awful. I think 20s are worse.
Yeah.
And for most people, they really are kind of sucky. And then, you get in your 30s, and then, hopefully you can start to get clarity around what you're trying to do. And you have a better toolkit to deal with the ups and downs of life. And so I just hope that maybe I can be helpful to her in this period around how to manage the ups and downs that are inevitably going to happen, how to manage the different challenges, because I've been through them, how to manage the anxieties that are sure to come from and uncertainties around where you exist in the world and how you make your way through it. So to some extent, I think parenting as you get older becomes more an exercise in wisdom than anything else.
I just have one question. Do you ever find yourself talking to Jane still?
I don't find myself talking to Jane. No, I find myself thinking about her at different times. I used to read to her all the time. When she was in the hospital, even though I don't know, I was actually reading to all the babies.
Yeah.
Like at night, because I'd go down there at night and I would sit next to her bed and I would read Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, Great children's book, by the way.
Wonderful.
Mo Williams. Yeah, I love that book, so I'd read Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus to her and to all the other kids. And, and I think it resonated with her. She knew my voice more than anything else, but I don't speak to her. I think about her, and to the extent that I'm able to honor her, I do it by agreeing to do this today. I think, and which is not super easy for me, to be honest, although I've enjoyed it immensely in talking to you guys with your good questions.
Yeah.
But agreeing to do this by writing about it, by telling her story when I can, because it resonates with other people. So to the extent that I'm keeping her alive, and again, that Irish tradition of if we're telling stories about people, can't be gone.
Right.
Then that's what I'm doing.
And we're really grateful for you for doing that.
Same.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm going to have to go up to Vermont sometime soon. Tom, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Come visit, man. Yeah, I'll feed you well.
I'm looking forward to it. We hope you enjoyed joining us for our conversation with Thomas Greene.
My First Year as a Father is an original Sophia Media production, created by me, Sophia.
This episode was produced by senior producer Gabby Watts, with creative direction by Shireen Anderson and original score by Nana Simopoulos, and co-hosted by Sophia and me, AC Valdez.
Check out our website at sophiamedia.co/myfirstyear for more episodes and other shows in the My First Year series, and for social links where you can join our online community.